5 years after divorcing me, Blake Harrington traded seats with one of his employees so he could spend the flight making jokes about my neighborhood, my clothes, and the legal fees he thought had ruined me. He had no idea that 3 5-year-old boys were waiting for me outside O'Hare, or that I had tried 23 times to tell him they existed when the boys jumped out of a black Bentley and ran toward me yelling, "Mom!" Blake stopped in the pickup lane and stared at 3 small versions of his own face. My oldest son noticed him first. Before I could answer, Ethan pointed at Blake and said, "He kind of looks like us." Blake's face lost all color. "How old are they?" "5, Oliver answered. "I'm 7 minutes older." Blake looked at me. "Emma, are those?" "Yes." He took one step closer. "Why didn't you tell me?" I had waited 5 years for that question. "I did," I said. "Your people made sure you never heard me." Blake Harrington was already wealthy when I met him. By the time our marriage ended, financial magazines were estimating his net worth in the hundreds of millions. The real number was much higher. I met him when I was 26 and working as a junior contracts attorney in Chicago. He was 34, running his 3rd company, buying distressed businesses and appearing in magazines that described him as a visionary. Blake knew how to make attention feel like affection. When he spoke to you, he held eye contact longer than most people. He remembered small details. He sent cars instead of asking whether you needed a ride. He made reservations at restaurants where normal people waited months for a table. For the first few months, I felt chosen. We dated for 8 months. He proposed during the 9th. My mother asked whether it was moving too quickly. I said, "When you know, you know." I had no idea what I knew. The first serious warning came during the prenup negotiations. Blake's attorney sent me a document that protected everything he owned and made me responsible for several categories of debt I had never created. Under some sections, I could have left the marriage with less money than I had when I entered it. I was a contracts attorney. I understood exactly what they were trying to do. I hired my own lawyer. Blake acted hurt. "You think I'm trying to cheat you? I think your attorneys wrote a one-sided agreement. They're protecting me." "From what?" He leaned back in his chair. "People change when money is involved. So let's write something fair. Negotiations took 4 months and cost me almost $60,000. Blake could have paid that amount without noticing. For me, it was most of my savings. He watched me spend it anyway. When we finally reached a reasonable agreement, he kissed my forehead and said, "It sounded supportive." Later, I understood that the entire fight had been a test. He wanted to know how hard I would push and how much pressure it would take to make me stop. The marriage looked good from the outside. We lived in Lincoln Park. We attended charity events. We traveled. We hosted dinners for investors and executives. I left my law firm and became in-house counsel for one of Blake's companies. At the time, it felt like an opportunity. The salary was higher. The title was better. I had direct access to major transaction. Income, health insurance, and professional network were tied to my husband. Blake never ordered me to leave my firm. He didn't need to. He described the new position as something we could build together. He said he trusted me more than any outside attorney. I wanted to believe that meant we were partners. What it meant was that when he decided to end the marriage, he controlled almost every part of the ground beneath me. He gave me divorce papers on a Tuesday afternoon. I came home early because a meeting had been canceled. Blake was sitting in the leather chair in his study. He only used that chair when he had already made a decision and wanted the conversation to feel formal. There was a folder on the desk. "Sit down," he said. I remained standing. "What happened?" "Nothing happened." He pushed the folder toward me. "I've had the documents prepared." I opened it and saw the petition. "You're divorcing me? This hasn't worked for a long time." "That's the first I'm hearing of it." "You've felt the distance." "I thought you were working." "I have been. Is there someone directly at me?" "That's not what this is about." It wasn't an answer. He said the process would be easier if I accepted the property terms already listed in the prenup. He said fighting would only waste time and money. "Whose time?" I asked. "Emma." And whose me stood. "I don't want this to become ugly. You handed me divorce papers without one conversation. We've had plenty of conversations, not about ending our marriage." He looked annoyed, as if I were focusing on an unimportant detail. "I'm trying to handle this respectfully." "No, you're trying to handle it efficiently." His jaw tightened. That is exactly the kind of response that made this necessary. He had already changed the story. He was not a husband who had prepared a secret divorce. I was a difficult woman proving why he needed one. I moved into a rental apartment while our attorneys worked through the separation. My position at his company ended 2 weeks later. Officially, the role was being restructured. Unofficially, everyone understood that the owner did not want his former wife inside the company. My employment agreement included a 2-year non-compete clause. It prevented me from returning to the specialty where I had built most of my experience. I challenged it, but Blake's legal team had written it carefully. I could work. I just couldn't do the work that paid me well. The divorce was finalized 7 months after Blake filed. By then, I had confirmed he had been involved with his executive assistant, Marissa Chen, before he ended our marriage. I never found one message that said, "We are having an affair." Blake was too careful for that. There were hotel travel overlaps, private dinners, and employees who became uncomfortable when I asked simple questions. Marissa had been beside him for years. She was intelligent, controlled, and completely loyal to him. She handled his schedule, personal calls, legal correspondence, and access to the 23rd floor of Harrington Capitol. Nothing reached Blake unless Marissa decided it should. I became one of the things she decided he no longer needed to see. What neither of them knew was that I was pregnant. I found out during the divorce proceedings. I was in the bathroom of my rental apartment when the first test turned positive. I took 2 more. All 3 gave me the same answer. According to my doctor, I was approximately 6 weeks pregnant. The conception date fell clearly inside the marriage. My first thought was that I needed to tell Blake. I called his personal number. A recording said the number had changed. I called his office. Marissa, Harrington Capitol. I need to speak to Blake. Who is calling? You know who this is. There was a pause. Mr. Harrington is unavailable. This is urgent. Everything is urgent to someone. I'm pregnant. She did not gasp. She did not ask whether I was sure. Her voice stayed flat. You should communicate through counsel. I'm telling you because his personal number was changed. I'll make a note. Marissa, I'm carrying Blake's child. I heard you. Will you tell him? I said I would make a note. The call ended. Blake never contacted me. I called the attorney who had represented him during the divorce. His name was David Park. I explained the pregnancy. He paused before answering. Ms. Caldwell, I recommend that you consult independent counsel before making statements you may later wish to withdraw. I'm not withdrawing a pregnancy. I'm not offering medical advice. You're telling me Blake won't accept this. I'm telling you to use the proper legal process. I was an attorney. I understood the difference between advice and a warning. I hired Carolyn Vega, a family law specialist with nearly 20 years of experience. She read the divorce documents, the prenatal report, and my notes from the calls. Then she said, "You have the right to notify him." I tried. You made a phone call. Now we create evidence. Carolyn sent a certified letter to David Park's office. The letter gave the pregnancy timeline and requested written confirmation that Blake had received notice. The envelope came back. David Park was apparently no longer handling Blake's personal matters. We were directed to another firm, Scolari & West. They represented wealthy clients who wanted personal problems handled quietly. Carolyn sent the same information there. A paralegal confirmed receipt by phone and said someone would respond within 3 business days. No one did. We sent another letter, then another. I called the office. I left messages. Nothing reached Blake at 11 weeks pregnant. Tired of being routed between employees, I went to Harrington Capitol. I wore a suit and carried copies of the medical records. The receptionist recognized my name. His face became uncomfortable. I need to speak with Blake. Mr. Harrington isn't available. I can wait. I don't think that will be possible. Then get Marissa. She appeared 3 minutes later. She wore a gray suit and looked exactly as composed as she had during our marriage. Emma, this is inappropriate. I'm pregnant. I'm aware you've made that claim. It isn't a claim. Your attorney should contact Blake's attorneys. She has. They won't respond. That is not something I manage. You manage everything that reaches him. Her expression did not move. I'll tell him you stopped by. I need to hear him say he knows. She turned toward the security door. Marissa. She looked back. If he finds out years from now that you knew, what are you going to tell him? For the first time, something changed in her face. It lasted less than a second. Then she walked away. I returned twice, the final time, and had not yet learned I was carrying triplets. A security officer named Todd Reeves met me near the elevators. He was polite. He was also built like someone whose politeness had never been tested for long M's. Caldwell, Mr. Harrington has requested no unannounced contact. Did he personally request? You need to leave. I have medical information he has a right to receive. You may send it through counsel. I did. If you return again without an appointment, the company may file a trespass complaint. He walked me to the lobby and out to the curb. I sat in a taxi holding an envelope containing an ultrasound report and cried until the driver quietly passed me a box of tissues. At 16 weeks, Dr. Patricia Okoye turned the monitor toward me. She was a maternal fetal medicine specialist at Northwestern Memorial and had the calmest voice I had ever heard. "There are 3, she said. I thought I had misunderstood. 3 what? Babies. I looked at the screen. She pointed carefully. 1, 2, 3. I'm having triplets? Yes. I laughed once because my body had no better response. Are they okay? At the moment, all 3 have strong heartbeats. A triplet pregnancy requires close monitoring. We'll go through the risks one at a time. I called my mother first. She drove up from Indianapolis. My sister Diane came from Cincinnati. They arrived with groceries, folders, and 3 different opinions about how I should organize the nursery. No one told me I had ruined my life. No one asked why I hadn't been more careful. Deanne stood in my kitchen, looked at the 3 ultrasound images, and said, "Blake is going to pass out." He has to receive the information first. You're still trying? Carolyn had received a response from Scalery and West by then. It was 4 pages long. The firm said Blake would not accept paternity without DNA confirmation. They warned us against making unsupported financial claims and stated that any legal action would be strongly contested. Diane read it. They're daring you to sue. I know, so sue. I'm fighting the non-compete, paying rent, and preparing for 3 babies. Blake can spend more on 1 month of lawyers than I have left in savings. What are you going to do? Have the babies and document everything. Rebuild my career. Then fight when the fight won't destroy us. The boys were born early but healthy. Oliver arrived first. 7 minutes later came Ethan. Already making enough noise for the entire room, Noah came last. He was smaller than his brothers and watched everything with dark, serious eyes. All 3 had Blake's eyes. The nurses noticed. My mother noticed. Deanne noticed. Dr. Okoye looked at them and said, "Genetics can be very to the hospital." No flowers arrived. No attorney called. I hired a night nurse for the first 3 months. It was expensive. And it was the only expense I never questioned. There were 3 infants and 1 of me. My mother stayed when she could. Diane drove in on weekends. Friends delivered food. I still spent most nights moving between 3 bassinets, feeding 1 child while another cried and the third finally fell asleep. Some mornings, I could not remember whether I had showered. Other mornings, I sat on the kitchen floor and ate cereal from the box because every clean bowl was in the dishwasher and unloading it felt impossible. I kept working. The non-compete prevented me from returning to corporate litigation, so I joined a small estate planning and probate practice as a contract consultant. It was not the career I had built. The pay was lower. The work kept the lights on. Not merely Blake Harrington's discarded wife. Carolyn told me to save every record. I did every phone call, every certified letter, every returned envelope, every person who promised to call back, every security report, every visit to Harrington Capital. I obtained the building's visitor records through the appropriate process and matched them to my own notes. By the time the boys turned 1, I had documented 23 attempts to notify Blake over 14 months. 23. I stopped contacting him directly after that, not because I no longer wanted my sons to know their father, because Carolyn told me to wait until I was financially strong enough to survive the case. "You are dealing with a man who can hire 10 firms without changing his lifestyle," she said. "You don't file until you can finish." I placed every document in a fireproof box beneath my bed. Then I concentrated on making sure the boys and I could live without anything from Blake. The non-compete expired when they were 14 months old. Within 2 months, I returned to litigation. Harlow and Stein hired me as a senior associate. It was a step below where I believed I should have been. For 18 months, I worked harder than I had at any point in my career. I took difficult cases other lawyers avoided. I prepared every deposition as though the opposing witness had been trained by Blake. I made partner. By then, the boys were nearly 3. Oliver organized his toys by size and purpose. Ethan climbed anything that remained still for more than 5 seconds. Noah spoke less than his brothers but remembered every promise anyone made to him. They occasionally asked about their father. At first, the questions were simple. "Do we have a dad?" "Yes." "Where is he? He doesn't live with us." "Does he know us?" That question was harder. "He doesn't know you yet." "Why?" Adults made some bad decisions. I never told them Blake could prove he had not. Other people had controlled the information. I did not know how much Blake understood or whether he had deliberately chosen not to ask questions. I refused to turn uncertainty into a story my sons would have to carry. Once I had the income to Marcus Reed, a forensic financial analyst who had previously worked for the IRS. I needed a realistic estimate of Blake's wealth before filing for paternity and child support. His report was 47 pages, between $400 and $600 million. Marcus identified holding companies, trusts, investments, real estate, and private equity interests, suggesting the real number was between 1.2 and 1.8 billion. "What would support look like for 3 children?" I asked. Marcus leaned back, potentially 8 figures per year. I stared at him. "I'm not doing this for his money. I know, I've supported them without him." "I know that too." "Then why does the number matter?" "Because his attorneys will say the children's needs are ordinary. The law also considers the life they would have shared if both parents had been present." I looked down at the report. "I don't want them raised like princes." "Then don't raise them like princes. Don't let pride make you negotiate away rights that belong to them." That was the part I needed to remember. Any support belonged to the boys. It was not a reward for me and not a punishment for Blake. By their 3rd birthday, Carolyn and I had a complete filing ready. We had medical evidence, conception timeline, the contact records, affidavits, returned letters, visitor logs, and the report from Todd documenting the day I was removed from Blake's office. The hospital still had the boys' genetic records. A judge could order Blake to provide a sample. We were prepared to file. Then Blake sued Claire Holloway. She was investigating Harrington Capital's purchase of a pharmaceutical distribution company. During her reporting, a former employee mentioned that Marissa Chen controlled an unusual amount of Blake's personal and legal correspondence. The comment was small. Blake treated it as an attack. His attorneys filed a defamation suit. That decision gave Claire's legal team the right to request evidence. Her attorney, Renata Espinosa, had spent 15 years representing investigative journalists. She understood exactly how to use discovery against someone who had filed too aggressively. Renata found Carolyn. Carolyn called me. A lawyer representing Claire Holloway wants to speak to you about Marissa. How did she get my name? Former employees, old legal records, your returned letters. What does she know? Enough to ask the right questions. I agreed to meet her. Renata went through my fireproof box file in her conference room. She did not rush. When she reached the letters returned by Blake's former law firms, she stopped. These went to attorneys who were representing him at the time. Yes, and each firm redirected you somewhere else? Yes, she looked at another document. Marissa has a law degree. I didn't know that. She never practiced, but she understands routing, privilege, and document retention. She knew how to make the letters disappear. She knew how to move them without technically destroying them. Can you prove she did it? Not yet. The proof came from a former Harrington Capital IT employee named Derek Chung. During a hardware replacement, Derek had preserved an image of an administrative server that was scheduled to be wiped. It was a standard backup habit he had learned at an earlier job. That server contained archived email from a shared account Marissa had used to manage Blake's personal legal correspondence. My letters were there. Someone had scanned them before returning the originals. Attached to the scans were Marissa's notes. Do not fort sexy matters. Do not bring detention without my review. One note mentioned a hospital letter. Marissa had written mentioned a hospital. Marissa had muttered. She had seen everything. She knew I was pregnant. She knew I was trying to reach Blake. She had kept the information from him. Whether she did it because she was protecting her own relationship with Blake, protecting his image, or simply enjoying the control, I still don't know. The server image became Exhibit F in Claire Holloway's case. Blake's defamation suit collapsed almost immediately. Marissa was placed on administrative leave the next morning. The following day, Carolyn received a letter from Blake's newest attorneys. The tone was completely different. They wanted a meeting. They wanted copies of our records. They wanted to discuss the paternity claim. For 5 years, I had been treated like a woman making an unwanted allegation. One server backup changed the entire conversation. 4 days later, I boarded a flight back to Chicago after a case settlement. I had an aisle seat and was reviewing notes on my tablet when Blake stopped beside my row. He was traveling with an employee who sat directly behind me. They looked at the empty seat next to mine, then at his colleague. Take mine. The employee hesitated. Mr. Harrington, you have more room up front. I'll survive. He placed his bag overhead and sat beside me. That was how Blake behaved when he wanted control of a conversation. He entered your space and acted as though you had invited him. Emma, Blake. He looked me over. You look tired. I have 3 children. He did not understand what I had just told him. Instead, he smiled. I heard you moved out of Lincoln Park. Yes, couldn't keep up with the property wanted to. And you're back in litigation? Yes. I imagine the legal fees from our divorce set you back. His employee behind us was close enough to hear. That was the point. Blake ordered Chardonnay and asked the flight attendant for the good one. She told him there was only one available. He looked disappointed on principle. For most of the flight, he continued making small comments. He asked whether I regretted fighting the prenup company had been replaced by 2 people. He asked if I had finally learned that independence was expensive. 5 years earlier, I would have defended every choice. I would have explained my career, income, home, and reasons. I gave him nothing. Blake mistook silence for embarrassment. He had always made that mistake. What he did not know was that his attorneys already had Exhibit F. He did not know Carolyn had scheduled a meeting for Friday. He did not know Marcus Reed had mapped his financial holdings. And he did not know 3 boys with his face were leaving school early, wanted to surprise Noah with a birthday present. The plane landed at O'Hare shortly before 5. Blake stood first and took his time removing his bag. He blocked the aisle while people waited behind him. Then he walked ahead without looking back. Outside the terminal, Judith Bentley was waiting at the curb. The rear door opened before I reached it. Oliver ran out first. Mom, he threw both arms around me. Did you know the continents move? Really slowly, but they're always moving. I did know that. I'm going to be a geologist. Last week, you were going to be a judge. I can do both. Ethan reached me next and nearly knocked my bag from my shoulder. Noah came last. He wrapped both arms around my waist and pressed his face into my coat. Behind me, someone stopped walking. I did not need to turn. Oliver looked past my shoulder. Mom, there's him leaned sideways. He looks like us. I turned. Blake stood several feet away. His employee was behind him, holding both bags. Blake looked from one boy to the next. The same dark eyes, the same high cheekbones. The same way. Oliver narrowed his eyes. How old are they? Blake asked. 5. Oliver said. I'm older. By 7 minutes, Ethan added. He tells everybody. Blake looked at me. Triplets? Yes. His mouth opened. He closed it again. How? I almost laughed. Instead, I said, you understand how? That isn't what I meant. He stepped closer. Judith got out of the car and stood near the driver's door. She did not interrupt, but she was not leaving me alone. Blake looked at the boys again. Then his face tightened. Why didn't you tell me? Tried. No, I contacted your office, your lawyers, and your home. I never received anything. I know. What does that mean? 23 documented attempts over 14 months. He shook his head. That isn't possible. I have the dates, names, returned envelopes, visitor logs, and the security report from when Todd Reeves removed me from your building. Todd, I went to your office 3 times. You never came to my office. I reached the lobby. Marissa stopped me. The name changed his expression. I continued. The first time I told her I was pregnant. The last time, your security chief warned me that I would be arrested for trespassing. Blake looked toward the terminal as if Marissa might appear and explain it. She knew. She saw everything. You can't know that. Your attorneys have the server image. His eyes moved back to me. Exhibit F. That was when he understood. This was not a claim I had invented at the curb. She routed them through an administrative account and marked them not to be forwarded to you. Blake's voice came out quieter. I didn't know. I believe you. He stared at me. That answer seemed to hurt more than an accusation. He reached toward my arm. Ethan stepped between us. Don't touch my mom. He was 5 years old and barely reached Blake's elbow. He planted both feet as though he expected to hold back a billionaire by force. Blake lowered his hand. I wasn't going to hurt her. Ethan looked at me for, it's okay, I said. Oliver had been watching the entire exchange. He tugged my sleeve. Is he our dad? I knelt in front of him. There are things we need to talk about at home. That's not what I asked. He had always been direct. I placed one hand against his cheek. Yes, he is. Oliver looked at Blake. Noah moved closer to my side. Blake's face changed. The confident man from the plane was gone. There was no colleague to impress and no comment sharp enough to take control of what was happening. He was looking at 5 years he could not purchase back. Oliver asked him, were you looking for us? Blake pressed his lips together. Oliver considered the answer. Then he nodded. Okay. He pointed to himself. I'm Oliver. Then to his brothers. That's Ethan. He's loud. But he's nice, Ethan said loudly. Oliver ignored him. That's Noah. He doesn't talk much, but he remembers everything. Blake wiped one hand across his face. I'm Blake. We know, Oliver said. Mom said your name once when she thought we were asleep. Blake looked at me over Oliver's head. Every legal fight waiting for us was in that look. Paternity, DNA support, custody, the money, the missing 5 years. Marissa, the question of whether Blake had truly known nothing or had simply enjoyed not asking. I stood. Our attorneys are meeting Friday. He nodded. I'll be there. DNA testing will be arranged. Whatever you need. This is not about the boys. I understand. No, you don't, not yet. I want to. That was the first honest sentence I had heard from him all day. I'm not trying to destroy you, I said. I wanted them to have a father. His eyes filled. Emma, I'm sorry. I had imagined his apology many times. Sometimes I imagined shouting. Sometimes I imagined handing him the entire file and walking away. When the apology came, I mostly felt tired. I know. Judith opened the rear door. Noah climbed in first. Ethan followed while explaining something about the airport. Oliver remained on the curb. He looked at Blake. Are you coming? Blake turned toward me. Not today, I said. Soon. Oliver accepted that. He climbed into the car. I joined them and closed the door. Through the window, I watched Blake remain on the curb while the Bentley pulled away. He did not follow us. He did not call anyone. He stood there holding his bag and watched his sons disappear into traffic. Noah found my hand in the back seat. He held it with both of his. Were you scared? He asked. Yes, of him, of what would happen. Are we okay? We're okay. The DNA results came back exactly as expected. Blake was their father. The financial negotiations were handled privately. I did not agree to hide the boys, and Blake did not ask me to. The support arrangement protected their education, medical care, future housing, and long-term financial security. I kept working. I did not move into one of Blake's buildings or allow him to place my career under his control again. The custody process took 3 months. Carolyn called it the smoothest contested agreement she had handled in 19 years. Blake's attorneys cooperated. Part of that was probably because Exhibit F had placed Harrington Capital in a dangerous legal position. Part of it was because Blake finally understood that winning an argument was not the same as becoming a father. He began with supervised meetings. The first took place in a child therapist's office. Blake arrived 20 minutes early. Oliver brought a notebook of questions. Why didn't you know about us? Blake looked at me, then back at Oliver. Someone kept the information from me. Why did she do that? No. Did you fire her? Blake almost smiled. She no longer works for me. That was true. Marissa resigned from Harrington Capital in January. I never learned whether Blake demanded it or she left before he could. I did not contact her. What she did was deliberate. Her notes were clear. She had decided 3 unborn children were information Blake did not need. I also knew she was not the only reason the system worked. Blake had built a life where one person could block his former wife, reroute legal notices, and keep major personal information from him for years. His money had insulated him so completely that he had stopped asking what was being kept outside. Marissa used that system. Blake created it. Boys started spending Wednesdays and every other weekend returned from the first visit with a complete report. His apartment is too big. How big? There are 2 living rooms. Why does one person need 2 living rooms? I don't know. He likes the same nature shows as me. That's good. He has a dog named Marcus. That's also good. It's suspicious because the money man was named Marcus. You weren't supposed to know that. I heard Aunt Diane. Ethan came home excited because Blake had taught him to throw a football. He demonstrated in my living room and broke a lamp. He apologized to the lamp before apologizing to me. Noah said almost nothing about Blake. He sat beside me at breakfast and rested his head on my shoulder. Mom, yeah. I like him, I'm glad. He's quiet. Sometimes. He thinks a lot. Like you? Noah nodded. Like me. He returned to his cereal. The February sun reflected off the snow. 5 years earlier, I had sat alone in a rental apartment with 3 pregnancy tests on the bathroom counter. I had not known whether I could afford 1 child. I had not known whether Blake would believe me, fight me, or ever receive the information at all. What I knew was that my children deserved the truth. So I kept records. I rebuilt my career. I waited until I could finish what I started. Oliver's question at the airport stayed with me. Were you looking for us? Blake had not been. He could not look for children he did not know existed. But I had been looking for something too. I had been looking for the life where my sons knew the truth without being used as weapons. A life where their father could enter it without controlling it. A life where I did not have to choose protecting myself and giving them the chance to know him. It took 5 years, 23 attempts, 3 returned sets of legal notices, a security report, a 47-page financial analysis, a journalist defamation case, and 1 forgotten server backup. But I found it. That morning, Noah stayed against my shoulder while Oliver read a book at the other end of the table and Ethan tried to balance a spoon on his nose. No one was yelling. No lawyers were calling. No one was standing outside an office asking to be heard. It was just breakfast. That was enough.